Anyway, hope you all had a lovely weekend. It's Gareth here, complete with a lockdown beard because in the UK we are in our second lockdown, which very stressful for some people, and they do have my sympathies. For me, creates that little bit more time to do things like this. So every cloud, as they say, every cloud has a silver lining. So just here on a Sunday night, it's nearly 7 UK time. I have to go at 8 and watch His Dark Materials. But I wanted to come and have a quick chat about a blog post that's going live tomorrow about 5 ways that the Spanish Princess, which I know is a popular series for many people, has been continuing, I suppose, this trend of the character assassination of Margaret Beaufort, who, as many know, is one of my all-time favorite historical figures. I think she's very inspiring, beyond perhaps anybody else in our history, but perhaps not. I mean, that's a big subject. um and I want to do, I might use this footage as a video and put it with the article, because these sorts of people, I put these videos on YouTube, and I think a lot of people search to try and get to the truth of the shows that they're watching, and for very good reason too. Okay, so the Spanish Princess. I said before, and I'll say it again. I have no problem with the fact that historical fiction isn't factually accurate. I recognize that if you're making a TV show for the 21st century, however gripping the real facts of history are, it's not going to translate in that way. You're going to have to dramatize. You're going to need poetic license, and you're certainly going to have to oversimplify, because and you're going to have to be more binary. If actual history is about footnotes and caveats and qualifications and context, stories aren't. Stories are about good guys and bad guys, and good girls and bad girls, heroes and villains, clear narratives, beginning, middle, and an end, everything hanging together. So I have no problem with many of the liberties taken. I enjoyed the Tudors. I didn't mind the White Queen and the White Princess. Um, where I do take exception is where somebody's character is completely distorted and completely turned on its head for reasons that are somewhat beyond me. Now, to an extent, that's happened to Margaret Beaufort in all the relevant Philippa Gregory novels and their corresponding TV adaptations. Although, as is so often the case, that the books can be that much little bit more balanced and paint that little bit more of a rounded picture, because there's more time. You can do more with words, and you can put more nuance. And naturally, in terms of the Red Queen book, you can get inside Margaret Beaufort's head a little bit more and give her side of the story. However, the Spanish Princess for me has crossed a line, because I think it literally carries on this impression of Margaret as a pantomime baddie, and actually puts her at the center of events, which she would have been nowhere near. And that's not now just a different question about how we interpret or imagine a personality. We know full well she was nowhere near or nothing to do with some of the events she's depicted as being responsible for in the Spanish Princess. And one event in particular, where her whole personality is frankly is totally is totally distorted, and Elaine thinks so too. And I'm glad you agree with me, Elaine. So going to very quickly just fire off what those are. And the first is this ridiculous claim that when Henry VII went into mourning for Elizabeth of York, and he certainly did in real life go into deep mourning for his wife who died unexpectedly after childbirth, that Margaret became regent of the kingdom and ruled in his stead. Well, that's just not based in historic fact. It's entirely invented. And actually, Henry VII, who was known to be a very secretive, very controlling king, who took a very personal, firm grip on government, quite famously, and actually reinvented the structures of government as he did so, um, became even more like that once Elizabeth of York had died. He became even more controlling, even more obsessed with the detail of government. He did not surrender that power to anybody, and he certainly did not surrender that power to his mother. So that's something that comes up in the Spanish Princess, which is just entirely an invention. Just gonna have a sip of my wine. And on to the next one. So the next one, this is quite closely connected to that, is throughout the series, Margaret almost seems to be in control of England. So Henry VII is there, but he's quite a passive figure, and Margaret is really governing England through him. She's taking control of access to him. She's controlling who's going in and out, what he sees, and she's really the orchestrator of, as is portrayed in the series, terrible decisions that the government of England makes. This is simply not true. Again, first of all, however much of a feminist I might be, I think we have to all accept that the notion that a woman would have had that kind of power in any reign in those days is it would be to completely misunderstand, sadly, the way that the role of women was viewed in the early 1500s, but also it's to totally misunderstand Henry VII's kingship. As I've said before, he was a very secretive, private king that had a very personal grip of the government of England. The fact he would let anybody, including his mother, rule through him is just an absolute nonsense. It's to misunderstand all the work that scholars have done on trying to recreate the kingship of Henry VII. But even more basically than any of that, although there's always this impression from fiction that Margaret's constantly at her son's side, in the second half of his reign, once him and Elizabeth of York became more established as king and queen consort, Margaret exits stage quite a bit. She sets up her own establishment in Collie Weston, in Northamptonshire, and she wants to be the master or mistress of the great lady of that household, which she presides over with some style. So yes, she does want this reverence, and she does want this kind of power, but she wants it in her own arena. She doesn't stick around at court and try and get involved in everything. She's a much more distant figure to the life of the court. She does administer justice in the north on behalf of her son, so she clearly has a trusted role, but she's not by his side whispering in his ear. Now, of course, people might say, well, we don't know for a fact what letters she was sending, and of course we don't. But in reality, we have got several letters that survive between mother and son, and certainly nothing from the tone of any of those suggests that she was some kind of proxy king in all but name, which is very much how she's portrayed in the series. The third point that I'd taken a lot of objection to was it's portrayed in the series that she has some kind of feud with Margaret Pole, who was born Margaret of Clarence, a Yorkist princess, effectively. She's actually at this point in history, she is the last remaining. Not that no, at this point she isn't, because some of Edward the Third's fourth daughters are still alive, but she is one of the few remaining male line descendants of Edward the Third still alive. So she's an important figure, and it probably is right to say that the early Tudors viewed her with the degree of, not her personally, but viewed her situation as one that was potentially threatening, because she did have um, that closeness to the royal bloodline. But in the series, Margaret is very much her adversary. She's the antagonist, and she does all sorts of terrible things to her. We just don't know anything about their relationship, is the truth of it. In the very, very early days of Henry VII's government, Margaret took some kind of role. She was the ward of Margaret, younger Margaret's brother, Edward, the Earl of Warwick, because someone trusted by the king needed to keep a close eye on him. So Margaret Beaufort oversaw him, but that role very quickly moved on to others. It probably is true that Margaret Beaufort was involved in arranging Margaret of Clarence's marriage to Reginald Pole, because Reginald Pole was Margaret Beaufort's nephew. And it is also true that Margaret Pole did struggle financially after Reginald's death, because her jointure just wasn't really sufficient for the lifestyle that she perhaps wanted to lead and to support her many children. There's absolutely nothing to link Margaret Beaufort to Margaret Pole's struggles. So the way they've been pitted against each other in the show as antagonistic toward each other is slightly mind-boggling, baffling, one might say. Then number four, um, in the series, Margaret Beaufort again is portrayed as a champion of Epsom and Dudley. She introduces the councillors during her time as regent, which, as we all know, isn't real. She introduced the council to Edmund Dudley and said, "This man is going to help us fill our coffers." And then the two of them together go on and inflict this harsh tax regime on England. I mean, that's just completely untrue. I'm just going to have a quick drink. It's completely untrue because it is true that toward the end of his years as king, Henry VII did introduce very strict financial penalties on the rich. But again, we're basically talking about taxes on the super rich here. So let's not get carried away with our sympathy and the awfulness of Henry VII's injustice. It's also true that he had advisors called Dudley and Epsom who were very much held responsible in the views of the nobility and the gentry for causing Henry VII to take this path. But there's absolutely nothing whatsoever to link Margaret Beaufort to being supporters of them or to being sympathetic to them. In fact, there's quite a lot of evidence to suggest she wasn't. She, like most of the rich, fell foul of their rules and had disputes with them that she did not win, despite being the king's mother. And interestingly enough, when Margaret did have some influence over the government, which was in the first few weeks of Henry VIII's reign, which is when she played a kind of transitional role to help secure the new regime of her grandson, it was during that time that decisions were taken to harshly punish Epsom and Dudley as a kind of revenge for everything that had gone, as was seen, had gone wrong in the last years of Henry VII's reign. And of course, many of you will know that led to their execution. And Margaret seemed relatively fine with that. So that there cannot really, I don't think, be a suggestion that she was in any way in cahoots with them. It's absolute madness. But the fifth and final thing I wanted to pick up on, and this one I would go as far as to say actually upset me quite a lot, was it made out that Margaret Beaufort raised her granddaughters in the series Margaret and Mary um, as like lambs for the slaughter, that she reared them to go and have child marriages. And there's a scene where she's talking to the young Princess Mary, who looks about 9 at this point, and says, who's been engaged to the Emperor Charles V. I don't think he's the Emperor at this stage, though. That's true. She was betrothed to him and said, "Oh," and Margaret Beaufort says to, "Oh, I was about your age when I first got married, so as you can see, there is nothing to fear." And it's all quite sinister, like she's prepping this girl for something that she knows is going to be awful. That's the direct opposite to what happened in real life. In real life, Margaret's elder granddaughter, Princess Margaret, who was betrothed to the King of Scotland, was originally going to be sent at 9 years old to go and live in Scotland with the king. However, Margaret Beaufort, no doubt drawing on her own probably traumatic experiences as a child bride, along with her daughter-in-law, Elizabeth of York, which is a good example of the two of them working together, which did happen, um, went to the king and pleaded with him not to send her, saying that she's too young, that when she got there, effectively the king would not wait. They were insinuating he would consummate the marriage and that the young Margaret would be hurt. So here, rather than seeing Margaret Beaufort as this ambitious woman that do anything for the dynasty, whatever happens to her granddaughters, you see Margaret as a caring grandmother who's looking with maternal interest rather than dynastic interest. And that caring tenderness, which granted we don't have a lot of Margaret Beaufort in any sources because it's not the sort of thing you would really expect it to come across. But we do have it strongly there. And the Spanish Princess series, the writers of the Star series, have just flipped that on its head to instead make her this sort of savage, almost predatory woman um, that cares not a jot for her granddaughter's safety, their innocence, their girlhood, their childhood, but thinks they should do anything for the good of the dynasty. It's just a fabrication, and that made me very angry. So those are the main things that I have a problem with the White Princess. It's not White Princess. I do have some problems with the White Princess TV series as well, but with the Spanish Princess TV series. And I just and I finished my blog post by saying I'm not saying to people don't watch it or stop watching it. I've watched much of it. I haven't finished it yet. I can't because I can't get through because it makes me so angry. But I would like to try and see it through and watch series 2 as well. I think it's probably worth doing, and there are probably some good moments. What I am saying is, please, 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 don't base your impression of who Margaret Beaufort was on that series or any of these Philippa Gregory based series, and that's not a slight on Philippa Gregory. I've read many of her books and I enjoy them, but you've got to look at the true history. Nicola Tallis has got an excellent biography of Margaret Beaufort. Elizabeth Norton has got an excellent biography out of Margaret Beaufort. Have a read of those and base your impression and your understanding of Margaret on those. Okay, cool. Well, that was me. Just a quick one, just to get my thoughts across on Margaret Beaufort. Hope you're all really well. I have got quite low Wi-Fi signal where I am, so I'm hoping that you've all been able to see and hear this okay. But I will love you and leave you for now and look forward to chatting soon. Bye.